It was an off day for the Chicago White Sox as they picked up another DFA'd pitcher. Should Kansas City Royals catcher Salvador Perez be the next backstop for the White Sox? And let's check in on how the change of culture is going for the Sox. Hey, it's Elvis night, so you know Elvis Andrus will be at second base.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome back to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong die-hard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Our Chicago White Sox will take on the Milwaukee Brewers on Friday. Michael Kopech is going to be on the hill. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with Sirius XM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. State of the Sox, 47-69, 22 games under 500, but just 12 and a half games back in the AL Central as I record. White Sox had an off day on Thursday, and they needed it. What a week it has been. Thinking back to Michael Kopech's last start, which was, of course, Fight Night in Cleveland. Everything that has happened between the stuff, the comments that Rick Hahn has made, of course, the fallout from the fight, the Kenyon Middleton, the drama. It has been a wild week, and the Sox were able to, take a series from the Yankees, which is always good. And they welcome the Milwaukee Brewers here to the South Side. So the Sox, they've been gobbling up discarded pitchers, if you haven't noticed lately. A few teams have been making some roster moves. They've DFA'd a few pitchers, and the Sox have gobbled them up. They've purchased some from, I believe, the Los Angeles Dodgers for international money, trying to get a bunch of different arms. I'm wondering if it's because they feel like, look, the offseason isn't going to be very fruitful for a variety of reasons, and we just would like to get as many arms as possible to see what we can do with them come spring training. I don't know, but just on Thursday, there was another one. Right-hand pitcher Deivi Garcia claimed off waivers from the Yankees. Right-handed pitcher Liam Hendriks was transferred to the 60-day IL. Garcia, who was designated on Monday, went 3-4 with a 4.84 ERA over parts of 3 seasons with New York. To make room on the roster for Garcia, Hendriks was transferred to the 60-day IL. Garcia, 24 years old, spent most of the 2023 season at AAA, going 3-2 with a 5.67 ERA. So this was, according to MLB Trade Rumors, Steve Adams, Garcia was considered one of the sport's top pitching prospects not long ago, ranking on most top 100 lists prior to both the 2020 and 2021 seasons. The right-hander blitzed through the lower minors after signing an amateur out of the Dominican Republic, reaching the AA level as a 19-year-old back in 2018. He had success in both high A and AA the following year before being hit hard in AAA, but struggling at the minors' top level as a 20-year-old, facing vastly older competition. Hardly stood out as any kind of red flag. There were always some concerns about the manner in which Garcia would be able to handle a starter's workload, listed at 5'9" and 165 pounds. He's considerably slighter in frame than the overwhelming majority of big league starters. Garcia indeed has spent time on the injured list in each of the past 3 seasons, and his fastball velocity has fluctuated accordingly. He averaged 95.1 miles per hour this year in a pair of relief outings, a notable bump from the 92.1 miles per hour he averaged as a starter in the majors from 2020 to 2021. Whether the White Sox plan to use Garcia as a starter or reliever isn't clear at this point, but he spent the bulk of the 23 season coming out of the Scranton bullpen. For a Chicago team that's already waved the white flag on the 2023 season, there's plenty of sense in scooping up a former top prospect and seeing if a change of scenery can do him any good. Garcia is in his final minor league option year, meaning he can be sent to AAA for the remainder of the current season without needing to go through waivers. However, he'll be out of options next spring, so the White Sox will need to either keep him on the opening day roster or DFA him themselves if he's able to stick on the 40-man roster that long. Wave the white flag. What are you talking about, Steve Adams? Don't tell that to Pedro Grifol. Wins shall not be compromised for developmental purposes. Every win counts from here on out. As I said, we're only 12 and a half games back in the AL Central, Steve. How about that trade that did not happen? You might have heard about this. It kind of started to bubble up a few days ago. This was from Fansided. MLB rumors, potential White Sox Royals trade discussed before the deadline included 8-time All-Star. Before the trade deadline, the White Sox were one of the biggest sellers on the market. They ended up testing the market for nearly every player on their roster, including dealing a plethora of players. But what most people don't know is that they were sneakily looking into a trade for the Royals' 8-time All-Star, Salvador Perez. Bob Nightingale of USA Today reported in his notebook that this trade was discussed, but inevitably it fell through when the White Sox were unwilling to part with some of the prospects that Kansas City was asking for. But with the trade deadline in the rearview mirror now, that leaves everybody to wonder about the White Sox's intentions with this deal. If they are looking to obtain Perez, a 33-year-old catcher with some left in the tank, that means they're probably looking to win in the next year or two, right? Maybe this deal was the salary dump of Yasmani Grandal that they were looking for. In all reality, we'll never know the true details and reasoning behind this almost blockbuster deal. But it absolutely brings into question the direction of the White Sox, especially after a fire sale of MLB talent in July. I love that write-up. Everybody's questioning what the White Sox are doing, if that was rumored to be true. I believe Salvi is signed through the 2025 season and a 2026 option. So are the White Sox going to trade for Salvador Perez maybe this offseason? With Yasmani Grandal as good as gone and, not much after that. I don't know if Sebi Zavala is your answer long-term. I hope not. Carlos Perez, he might have some promise, but that's a very small sample size. They loaded up on some young prospects, of course, during this fire sale. I don't know if they're necessarily going to be ready for any full-time roles. I obviously will see what happens with spring training. I do think the Sox need a solid option. I just don't know if it is Salvador Perez, but it makes a ton of sense. Pedro Grifol is a big Salvador Perez guy, and Salvi Perez is a big Pedro Grifol guy. Way back when Pedro Grifol was hired, there were so many articles out there with Salvi Perez giving his stamp of approval, the close relationship that Grifol and Perez have as Grifol worked with the catchers, and Perez is a good one. He has eaten the Sox lunch time and time again. So, I don't know. I don't know if this is Pedro trying to say, look, we got a culture problem. I thought differently of some of these players. They proved me wrong. Maybe some proved him right. We cut the fat, so to speak, at the trade deadline. That's what it sounds like if you read between the lines from what Hahn and Grifol have alluded to with the conversation surrounding culture. They seem to have been addressing the problem. Now, Grifol might say, look, I need guys that I can trust. I need guys that are my guys. I inherited a roster that was pretty much, these were other guys. And I think Pedro had his say in a few guys, Hans or Alberto. And I think the guy we're going to talk about in a little bit here, Andrew Benintendi. But Salvi is absolutely a Grifol guy. So that is something to watch for. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. I absolutely not. If Hahn and the White Sox really do believe that they're going to compete in 2024, maybe they go after Perez. I don't know. Maybe they made some sort of good faith to the fan base or to Grifol of, look, this was a really tough year. We want to help you out. We're going to try to somehow set you up for success. You want Salvador Perez? We're going to go get him for you. A guy that I believe Pedro most definitely wanted on the White Sox, Andrew Benintendi, opened up about the culture change with the Southsiders. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Sleeper is a fantasy, sports, and real money gaming app focused on bringing people together through sports and gaming. Sleeper has become the fastest organically growing fantasy platform in the world, while earning some of the highest levels of engagement per user in the industry. At Sleeper, it's not just about sports, it's about building personal connections and lasting memories. Predict the hottest baseball stats like home runs, hits, strikeouts, and much more to cash in on your daily fantasy baseball skills. Use promo code LOCKEDON and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON upon sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Swing for the fences with promo code LOCKEDON and sign up to get that deposit match up to $100. Our White Sox face off against the Brewers on Friday. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Speaking of organic, the culture change and how it has to happen organically. That was an article by Daryl Van Scoven of the Chicago Sun-Times recently. Culture change has to happen organically. White Sox Andrew Benintendi says Sox happy to go to war together in final 47 games of lost season. It's easy to lay down and chase personal things, but that makes coming to the field every day not fun, said Andrew Benintendi, who signed that 5-year contract last offseason, believing postseason baseball, not meaningless games in August and September, were in his future. If we're not in a position to win this year, maybe we could spoil it for some teams, just showing up and competing every day. There's more to do than play spoiler, Van Scoven wrote. Changing culture is all the talk lately. While they're at trying to win games, perhaps things will begin to change in that regard. There are many layers to it. It's something you're always working on, said Benintendi, who played on postseason teams with the Red Sox from 2016 to 2018. And the more we talk about culture, obviously it's something important. But I feel like you talk about it all the time. It's kind of jammed down your throat, and it just has to happen organically. And these next 2 months, it's something we can work on. It's just getting better every day, getting closer to each other. The last week or so, it's been better. It's trending. Realizing where we're at, let's just enjoy it and have fun. The cards will fall where they may, Benintendi said. We have 47 games left. Might as well go out and enjoy it. Now, I think Andrew Benintendi hit on some interesting stuff there. I believe he absolutely is one of Pedro Griffol's guys. He had some experience with Griffol and Griffol with him during his short stint with the Royals. And I believe, Pedro, I talked about it in the offseason on a lockdown episode, maybe a couple episodes, that I think Pedro might have had a short list. And the Sox front office said, you know what, we can't obviously do everything. We're stuck here with some of these roster decisions, the player personnel, but we've got a little bit of wiggle room. Who are you after in free agency? What can we do? They needed a left fielder desperately. And, Grifol might have said, look, this guy, I've got experience with this guy. He's solid. I can vouch for him. I feel like he would fit into what I'm trying to do. And the White Sox went out and made that happen. Going back to the Salvi Perez thing, I think maybe if Pedro's around and they're saying, we're sticking with you, Pedro, but we want to give you a little bit more. We want more of your type of guy so you can build this culture. That might be happening this off season. And, when Benintendi talks about it happening organically, I remember being in different professional environments and work environments. Maybe you have this experience too, where you have these, team building professional development days, where it's like you go on a retreat or something and you're doing all these different kinds of activities, icebreakers and stuff to learn about yourself and how you communicate and how you relate to people on your work team or in your professional world. And, you learn a lot about yourself and you bond a little bit. You get out of that work environment and you get to know people maybe on a more personal level, and you can kind of get down to some real conversation and what makes each other click. It's got to be facilitated, and it can't be necessarily, when it's forced, when it's too forced, then it just doesn't happen. So organic is probably a good word for it. And I wonder, if that's just something that maybe in a weird way the White Sox have to incorporate, like bring in some team building experts. It sounds corny, I know, but in the off season or heading into Arizona, have some opportunities for the team to bond, go off campus and just be able to connect. You spend so much time with each other during a full baseball season, from early February all the way, hopefully, to the end of October. Man, you are with each other. And if there are cliques and if there are people that are just not getting along and you do not have each other's back, and that matters. We've talked about chemistry on this podcast, and I thought that was going to be something that was going to be a little different this season. And I think it went completely sideways. Obviously, it did. And now it's Pedro just figuring out what went wrong. I didn't know how to figure it out. I thought one thing and something else, occurred. And now it's, I get it. You want to play spoiler. You want every game to count. But I think you got to start taking stock in who you have on this ball club, who could be on the 2024 ball club, and working with some culture now. Hopefully you can bond. Hopefully some of these guys can start bonding now and just having some fun, as Benintendi said, relaxing a little bit. It is a lost season. I'm sorry. And I know people, when they go to the ball game and they pay good, honest money for a ticket, they want to see their team out there fighting tooth and nail to bring home a White Sox winner. I get that. That makes 100% sense. But in the situation where the White Sox are right now, I do believe it's a little bit about development. And that development could necessarily just be about culture, maybe playing certain guys together in different positions to see how they gel, so they know that they've got what they've got heading into the offseason. And it's like hit the ground running in the spring. But interesting stuff from Benintendi. Keep an eye on, how the Sox are having fun this weekend with the Milwaukee Brewers coming to town to 35th and Shields. Lots going on at the ballpark. More on that in a moment. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Sox Brewers. On Friday, it's Corbin Burns for Milwaukee, 9-6 with a 3.42 ERA. He's going against Michael Kopech. Saturday, Brandon Woodruff He's going against Jesse Schultens. Keep your eye on Jesse Schultens. I've liked what I've seen from Schultens his last several outings, and I think he's going to figure into 2024. Absolutely. On Sunday, Freddie Peralta for Milwaukee against Dylan Cease. That's the afternoon game. Michael Kopech has not allowed any runs on one hit with 2 walks in 1 inning against the Brewers in his career. Kopech has not faced the Brewers since 2021. So that one lone inning happened a few seasons ago. I think that was when he was coming out of the bullpen back then. I call it a disappointing and confusing season for Michael Kopech. And that's just me. I had some high hopes for Michael Kopech as we were entering. You make your predictions. Everybody's making win-loss predictions. Who's going to lead the team in home runs? Team MVP, comeback player. I really thought that this was going to be a year of Andrew Vaughn. He was going to make such a leap forward. And Kopech, I thought this was his time to shine. He was going to get right. He's got the starter thing under his belt now, and I thought he was really going to flourish. And it's been such up and down. I mean, we've seen the glimpses, we've seen the moments, even the game within the game. It might not be an impressive outing, but he's had moments in at-bats, innings where it's like, wow, your stuff is great. Sometimes it's just between the ears, that repeatable motion. Something falls off track, and he just cannot get it back on track. And that's what concerns me. So all eyes on him on Friday. He has a 5-10 record with an ERA of 4.43, 112 strikeouts in 21 appearances this season. Last start was against Cleveland. It was that fight night. He was on the mound and he was pitching pretty well, and he stayed in the game even after that 15-18 minute delay. His line against Cleveland last Saturday was 5 1/3, 3 hits, 2 earned runs, 4 walks, and 3 strikeouts. Last 4 outings, 5 1/3, 5 innings, 5 innings, 5 2/3. And then you go to that 2/3 of an inning, that disaster start. So again, if you've been around the block a few times as a baseball fan, as a Sox fan, you might say 5 innings, come on, give me a break here. And that's just not how baseball is these days. Unfortunately, it's like 5, 6 innings. I'd love it. Can you give me 7, 6 or 7? But 5, it still doesn't get me very excited as a fan, but that's kind of how things are going, especially for White Sox pitchers. And maybe that is the average in all of baseball, a little over 5, something like that. So we'll see what he has got for us on Friday. It is Elvis night. These are always jam-packed. If you've never been to an Elvis night, and maybe you can't make it on Friday, but do yourself a favor in the future, try to make it a point of attendance. It is a good time. Everybody's in, some sort of Elvis, whether it's a t-shirt or, the wig and the sideburns and the glasses. They got the jumpsuits going. They do pregame Elvis impersonators on that little stage by the Championship Plaza. Flying Elvi dropping in out of the sky into the outfield, which I'm sure the Sodfather is always so happy about. It's a lot of fun. It really is. It should be a packed house. I've been many of times, as I mentioned yesterday on the episode. I have my own Elvis jumpsuit. I kid you not. I've got the wig, I've got the glasses, and I've rocked the jumpsuit with some friends years ago. I've gone several times. It's always a lot of fun. Saturday is that football jersey that's brand new, number 88 for obviously Luis Robert Jr. And then Sunday, I think it's the Oris Bear mug. That's the I feel like they might have done this mug last year. I can't remember, but you got to give away just about, you got to give away Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And again, I think with the Brewers, our town, it's just like an old rivalry when they used to be in the American League together and obviously geographically so close. Different stories these days, but I've enjoyed my time in Milwaukee. I visited that city many of time, a lot of good memories. and the stadium is pretty great too. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of folks from the Brewer Nation coming down to the South Side to check out the White Sox for the weekend. Folks, thank you so very much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We're on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Questions, comments, you can get them in at lockedonsox@gmail.com. Our White Sox taking on the Brewers on Friday. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. Hey, thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. And hey, everydayers, man, you know who you are. And boy, do I appreciate it. On the next episode, I will recap the weekend that was as I count down my last few episodes. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski. Until next time, go Sox.